She started packing differently, quieter hands, neater folds, a new way her wrist turned when she rolled a blouse into a soft cylinder and tucked it into the suitcase like it might bruise if pressed too hard. She called it a conference, 3 nights, downtown by the harbor, name badges and breakout sessions, and a closing keynote about culture change. I nodded and asked if she wanted the black charger or the white one, as if voltage could steady us. Rain thickened the windows to a wet gray blur, and the apartment smelled like coffee cooling in the pot and the lemon cleaner she used for the counters. The hum of traffic threaded the silence, a thin cord holding the room together. She kissed the air next to my cheek. It landed like fog, then she was gone. The first night I made a simple dinner, pasta, olive oil, salt like snow from a high pinch. I set 2 plates out by mistake, a habit that felt like a small accident breaking into the open. The second plate sat there empty, the fork beside it reflecting the ceiling light like a single narrow eye. The television murmured with a sports recap I didn't follow. I chewed slowly, facing an empty chair that used to carry her half-smile and the small slant of her shoulders when she laughed. The apartment held its breath with me. Between each bite, the quiet stretched and thinned, translucent as onion skin. It wasn't one thing. It was a low, gathering field of static. The way her phone faced down on the table, the extra 30 seconds between message and reply, the new habit of stepping into the hallway to take this real quick. Her tenderness shifted, not gone, just misplaced. She still asked how I slept. She still left a sticky note on the kettle, have some tea. But there was a new courtesy inside her, like the careful politeness of strangers at an elevator. I tried to be generous. I tried to be modern. People grow, seasons turn. We don't shackle each other to old versions. But I kept hearing the lift and drop of her voice when she said conference. The word had big rooms in it. And those rooms were full of people with fresh faces and uncreased stories. On the second night, rain stitched the city into a single sheet, and the stairwell smelled like wet concrete. I lay on the couch with a book open on my chest. The lines drifted black reeds moving on a pale river. I drifted with them. A message lit the room. She sent a photo, a round table, white tablecloth, stemmed glasses, the shimmer of plated salmon under a warm chandelier. The angle was careful, no people in frame. Long day, she wrote. Heading to bed after this. I typed back something kind, something that wouldn't surface in a future argument like an old bottle with a note inside. Proof of who I was before the truth arrived. The truth arrived the way rain does, all at once, then obviously. The next morning, looking for a spare USB drive in the desk drawer, I found a folded receipt tucked under the warranty booklet for our kettle. It wasn't a search, it was a hand reaching for something ordinary and finding a hot edge instead. The paper was thin, thermal, the kind that fades over time like the details of a dream. The header read a hotel that wasn't the conference hotel, 2 glasses of Malbec, a late-night dessert creme brulee, a room charge noted to suite level. I stared at the ink until it trembled, either from my pulse or from some small breeze I couldn't feel. I told myself it could be anything. A vendor had comped them, a colleague's birthday, a mistake, a me-swipe, a misprint. People misprint all the time. The brain loves a story that keeps its furniture in place. But there, near the bottom, the line item, breakfast, room service, 2 guests. The date matched the photo of the salmon. The time matched the soft gap in our thread when she'd gone silent for 2 hours, because the keynote ran long. I sat down in the chair at the desk, and the chair felt new, like my weight had just been invented. The city beyond the window grew hushed and far. I put the receipt back, not neatly. I let it sit slightly crooked in the drawer like it could tilt the room. I stood in the hallway and listened to the apartment. Pipes thudded somewhere. A neighbor's laugh lifted and fell like a songbird in a storm. The air conditioner made its steady hum like a machine that believed in itself. At the doorway, her coat still hung, her scarf a loose loop, a memory of her throat. The scarf smelled like her shampoo, like quiet fruit and a clean morning. What would be easier, to keep the story I knew, or to open the door to the one shaking its handle? In the kitchen, a glass waited on the counter, a ring of water beneath it like a small eclipse. I pressed my thumb into the ring until it warmed and vanished. Then I turned, just to steady myself on the edge of the sink, and my hand found her travel-sized perfume in the dish where keys and coins collect. Not in her bag, not with her. A spritz for homecoming, maybe, or a forgetfulness that suddenly meant something. I lifted it and let one mist carry through the air. It smelled like the embrace we hadn't had in weeks. I felt greedy for it. I felt broken by it. By evening, the rain grew tired and the sky collapsed into a damp blue dusk. I sat at our table with 2 plates again, on purpose now, an experiment in appetite and absence. The fork beside her plate caught the lamplight in a thin, clean line. I imagined it as a seam, a place to split our lives open and see what they were made of. The phone lay face down, my own, because I didn't want the light. Because I couldn't bear the next sound. Somewhere inside me, a door eased on its hinges. The hinge was pain, the door was knowledge, and as it opened, the room grew quieter and wider, and there was no furniture left to hold in place. She texted at 10:07 p.m. Early start tomorrow. Love you. 2 words that felt like being handed warm tea with a razor in it. I typed back, sleep well. And then I drafted another text I didn't send, a text with questions that felt like a small trial, exhibits numbered, witnesses called. I deleted it, a whole courtroom wiped clean with one thumb. The screen went black. In that black, my reflection hovered, pale, indecisive, a man taking measure of his own outline. I didn't cry, not because I was strong. Because the body sometimes pauses to protect itself from floods. The flood was coming. It had gathered its miles. I set the phone on the table between the 2 plates like a bridge that didn't know which shore to favor. I turned off the light and sat in the dark. The city hummed. The refrigerator hummed back, a duet about ordinary persistence. Somewhere, 2 people slept in a room I didn't know. In this room, the empty chair faced me, still warm with the ghost of her, and the quiet rose like water, slow, patient, certain. When the rain finally stopped, the apartment seemed to listen for what replaced it. There was a thin, high ringing in my ears, a sound I recognized from childhood when I'd hold a seashell and swear I could hear the whole ocean inside. I realized it was just blood moving through a small body trying to contain it all. I stood, I washed both plates. I dried them. I placed them back, one atop the other, like a single decision stacked upon itself. When I turned around, the window held a pale reflection of me, and in that reflection, a second empty chair behind my shoulder, 2 absences, layered. The door to knowledge opened another inch. It didn't creak. That was almost worse. And then in the soft, tired hour when the city yawns and shifts on its own pillow, a rideshare idled outside the building, and a trunk shut with a soft thump. I walked to the peephole without a plan, without thought, only the raw compulsion of a sound that matched a fear. I looked, breath caught, heart a small animal at a fence. The hallway was just a hallway. The elevator numbers glowed their patient sequence, but the second thump, unmistakable, came from the floor above, and with it, laughter, 2 notes, then none. The silence after laughter is a cavern. I leaned my forehead to the door and closed my eyes. A key turned somewhere else. Not here, not yet. The hinge inside me gave another whisper and something small, necessary broke. Cliffhanger. I reached for the drawer, found the receipt again with fingers that felt borrowed, and laid it in the center of the table between the 2 plates, the ink catching the lamplight, a quiet, undeniable star. The apartment waited with me, suspended on that fragile point of light for what would be asked and what could never be unsaid. Sleep went thin, a gauze over the face. It let through light and little else. The ceiling became a map of minor constellations, the hairline cracked by the smoke detector, the faint shadow where an old leak once traced a river. The night breathed in the vents. The refrigerator clicked, shifted, settled. Each sound counted out a litany of small survivals, but the mind refused to close. It hovered over the receipt like a satellite over a burning field. The edges of it curled slightly at the corners by morning, as if it had aged a season in a few hours. Grief arrived in domestic measurements. Coffee tasted browned and distant. Toast went cold while standing at the sink. A shirt, my favorite one, the one she always said made my shoulders look like they'd carried storms, sat on the back of a chair, unclaimed. I moved through the rooms like a substitute in my own life, careful, precise, trying not to disturb the arrangement laid out by someone else. Her mug, rinsed, face downward on the drying rack. Her book, Essays on Cities and How Strangers Belong, lay open, face down, on the nightstand, a little tent over a sentence she had liked enough to stop on. I didn't look for more. That was a choice. It might have been a mistake. But something in me believed that evidence had a hunger of its own. If I fed it, it would devour the whole house. The receipt was enough. The way her voice had found a new pitch around certain words was enough. The empty chair was enough. Yet even in restraint, traces appeared on their own. A cab notification in the email she had forgotten to switch back from shared. A calendar event color-coded differently. A new contact in her list with a plain first name that tried too hard to be ordinary. His name, when the mind handed it to me, felt like a pebble held too long in a warm fist. It took the shape of patience and irritation both. I said it once out loud in the empty kitchen and startled at the sound, as if I had conjured him. The other man is a role a child could draw. Broader shoulders, cleaner shoes, a competence that carries rooms. But the truth is that he was probably as messy and afraid as anyone. He had a mother who wanted a call back. He had a plant he forgot to water. He had a way he believed he was good. That didn't ease the heat in my ribs when I pictured them at the tiny table of a suite, knees touching under linen, but it kept me from turning to stone. Friends asked in their way, "How's the week? You two doing anything this weekend? We should grab a drink." Their concern was a gentle hand on a bruise. I bobbed and weaved. I said work was heavy. I said sleep was weird. That last one was easy. Sleep was a shoreline I kept missing in the fog. When I finally drifted, images rose and fell like slow fish, her phone glowing in a dark hotel room, a second glass leaving a wet ring on a tray. Two bodies far and close at once. I woke with my teeth set too hard, jaw aching, a small thunder still rolling behind my ears. The turning point arrived oddly, not as a plan, as a refusal. She texted a photo at noon, city view, conference center banners like flags for a nation I didn't belong to. I typed, "Looks nice." Then I set the phone down and walked out into the rain without an umbrella. It wasn't a punishment. It was a calibration. The rain made the world honest, everyone wet, everyone blinking against it, everyone a little ridiculous. I walked 3 blocks to the river and leaned on the rail. Water moved the way time does when it knows a truth you don't want. I breathed until the breath went all the way to my feet. At home, I wrote a list on a yellow legal pad. Lists make the world small enough to hold. 1 ask. 2 listen, 3 don't perform, 4 decide. The lines felt temporary, like chalk on a wet sidewalk, but it was better than the orbit I had been trapped in. Along the margin, without meaning to, I drew a small chair, then another. 4 chairs in a row, each emptier than the last. I laughed, the short, surprised kind that sounds like a sneeze. Grief has a sense of humor, it's just very private about it. He had a public profile, of course. Everyone does. A photo of him at a conference 2 years ago, a blazer too tight at the shoulder, a smile that wanted to be smaller than the moment allowed, a quote about leadership that could belong to anyone. It wasn't satisfaction to find him. It was context, a tree on the map that tells you the paper is about a place and not a story you invented. I closed the tab. I folded the receipt again and slid it back into the drawer, not to hide it, but to give it a room it deserved, small, out of the way, real. That night, sleep finally came with a thin blanket of dreams that were less sharp. In one, she and I were assembling a table and couldn't find the last bolt. We kept making do with 3 when the diagram insisted on 4. We sat back and the table stood, stubborn, wobbly, a little proud of its instability. We decided to eat on the floor. We laughed. I woke with tears drying on my face, the good kind that leave the skin clean. Morning light gathered in a thin seam along the curtains, pale and patient, like a promise that wasn't making any demands yet. When her conference ended, when the taxi wheels finally turned toward our street, I had already cleared the table. I had already washed the cups. I had put away the legal pad. The chairs sat where they always had, ordinary and wooden and equal. I made coffee and left the window cracked to let the air trade places with itself. The apartment inhaled. It exhaled. I put my hand on the back of her chair. The wood felt cool. If it warmed under my palm, I told myself I would ask gently. If it stayed cool, I would ask anyway. The hinge inside me no longer squealed. It opened and closed as if it had always been well-oiled. Cliffhanger. Her message buzzed before the door. 10 minutes. I placed her travel perfume on the table beside the folded receipt like 2 small testimonies facing each other, and waited for the sound of her key in the lock, a bright, ordinary sound that would land like thunder. The key turned at 6:14 p.m. Tiny metal, big sound. I stood in the kitchen and pretended to fuss with the kettle, as if boiling water were urgent, as if steam knew how to be a shield. The door opened. She stepped in sideways, wrestling the wheel of her small suitcase over the threshold. For a second, she didn't look at me. She looked at the floor like she was returning to an old stage and needing to find her first mark. Then she lifted her face, the practiced smile in place, and saw me seeing her. It faltered, then softened, then tried again. She said my name at a gentle volume. The apartment smelled like rain evaporating from concrete. She smelled like hotel sheets washed in industrial lilies and the stubborn undernote of her shampoo. "Hey," she said, as if the word were a bridge and we just needed to cross it without looking down. She set the suitcase upright, handle extended, a flag planted in neutral ground. "How was your week?" The line tilted between performance and desire. People say what they wish could be true. Maybe that's kindness, maybe it's fear. "Before that," I said, and the words surprised me. They came out even with no serration. I gestured to the table. The perfume, the folded receipt, a small still life. Her eyes paused on each as if each needed its own grammar. She didn't reach for anything. Her hands stayed low, fingers touching as if she were trying to hold her own pulse. "I found this by accident," I said, which was true. "I don't want to search you." She closed her eyes. When she opened them, her gaze was clear in a way it hadn't been for months. There was a moment, thin, exact, when the apartment made a new noise, as if the building itself adjusted weight. She pulled the chair back and sat, not at her place, but beside it, as if she needed a different angle on this room. The light from the window put a pale ladder on the floorboards between us. She looked at the receipt, then at me. "I didn't plan to be that person," she said. The sentence fell apart as it landed. Tears gathered but held, the surface tension of a lake. "I'm so sorry." The words were small, but they had weight. They thudded into the wood between us and lay there, breathing. Anger rose, a clean, hot elevator, fast, but it wasn't the largest thing in the room. The largest thing was the map of our life together, each street we had named, each bench we had sat on while splitting a pastry, the winter we fixed the broken radiator with towels and laughter, the summer we slept with the fan rattling and joked that it spoke a language we would someday learn. How long? I asked. My voice wanted to be clinical. It found something softer. 2 months, she said, and the apartment narrowed, then widened, then found a third size between. It was slow, then it was fast. I felt seen. Or I convinced myself I did. I thought maybe it would remind me how to come back to us. She winced at her own words. That sounds like a terrible lie. Her hands unclasped and clasped again, a tide of bone and tendons moving without permission. What about him? The question felt gray and functional, like a city bus. He knows you're married, she nodded, a small, ashamed nod, like a confession made to a quiet room. It was never going to be a new life, she said. It felt like a mirror held at the right angle, and for a second I liked the reflection more. She looked at the window, at the ladder of light. I am not defending it. I don't know how I crossed from thinking to doing. The floor was there, then it wasn't. Silence followed, not empty, full of rearrangement. The kettle clicked off behind me, its small accomplishment recorded and then forgotten. I sat across from her. The receipt between us did not grow or shrink, it simply continued to exist. I wish you had told me you were lonely, I said. She laughed, one breath, no sound. I did, she whispered, in terrible ways. In small punishments I didn't call by their names. She looked at me, and for a moment the city disappeared and we were two people in a smaller place, younger, less edited. I wanted you to guess. That was unfair. Did you love him? I asked. The word love fits badly in some rooms, it echoes. She shook her head, then stopped. I don't know, she said. I loved being answered. I loved not being the same person for an hour. She took a breath. There was guilt even inside the pleasure. A lot of it was me running from a door that was always going to be locked. She looked down at the perfume. I kept that here because I wanted to smell like home when I came back. The sentence cracked her. A tear fell clean, almost relieved. Dignity is a small, stubborn animal. It wants to stand up, even when the ground is moving. Okay, I said, thank you for telling me. A strange sentence, but it was the one that arrived. She nodded like a student listening to bad news delivered kindly. What do we do? She asked, her voice catching on the we like cloth on a nail. We don't rush to be noble, I said. We don't torch the house to stay warm. A long, thin smile, sad and almost grateful, touched her mouth. I'll go to my sister's, she said. Tonight, if you want. The word tonight reached into the hallway, already packing itself. I looked at the chair beside her, the one she hadn't chosen, and thought about how furniture holds memory like faint perfume in wood grain. Tomorrow, I said, tonight we can sit, separate rooms, but we can sit. She nodded, the kind of nod that respects a truce more than it celebrates it. The kettle was still waiting. I poured water over tea leaves. Steam rose in thin veils. She wrapped her hands around the mug and didn't drink. We spoke in diagonals, not past each other, but not directly either. Childhood facts we knew but had never told. The time her father left a baseball game in the third inning and never explained why. The time I got lost in a grocery store and decided at 6 years old that panic was a private sport. The rain started again and stitched the windows with its patient thread. The city dimmed and brightened in pulses. She finally sipped the tea and said it was bitter. I said bitterness is honest. She nodded. When night came, she stood and rolled the suitcase to the bedroom. She moved through the space like a careful guest. She packed a small bag for tomorrow. She didn't ask what to take. She took a sweater, a toothbrush, a book about cities. She left the perfume. She set it gently back in the dish with the keys. I stood in the hallway and watched shadows bend over her shoulders. She turned and saw me, and for a second her face opened. Grief, apology, memory, a small defiant corner of affection. Good night, she said. Cliffhanger. In the quiet after her door clicked shut, I sat at the table with the receipt flat under my palm, feeling the heat of my skin pass into it, wondering what it would mean to let the ink fade, wondering if I could trust the light to do that work for me. Morning arrived like an apology the sky made to itself. Pale, even light slipped under the curtains and spread across the floorboards. The apartment smelled like the agreeable compromise between old rain and fresh coffee. The hum of traffic came softer, like the city had chosen to speak in its inside voice. I stood by the window barefoot and felt the wood cool under my arches. Release, if it comes, rarely announces itself. It doesn't knock. It settles an extra breath in a room that didn't know it had lungs. She had left early. A text on the counter beside her mug. At my sister's. Thank you for last night. I'll give you space. Her handwriting leaned right, hopeful even now, or maybe always. I poured coffee into the mug she'd used and watched the steam rise in two little rivers that met and disappeared. 2 lives, separate, still able to warm the same air. I waited for anger to thin me out. Instead, something else arrived, tired, yes, but generous, inarticulate, a willingness to be normal in the face of rupture. Forgiveness is a word that looks smooth from far away and rough up close. What I felt wasn't that word exactly. It was the willingness to let time speak before punishment did. It was saying, to myself more than to her, that I would not become more faithful to my pain than to my life. The imagined narratives, confrontations in public, long speeches in doorways, dramatic exits, fell away like coats from a chair in a warm room. What remained was light on wood grain, the simple elegance of clean dishes, the quiet agency of a person who can decide without performance. I opened the drawer, I took out the receipt. The ink had softened at the edges, shadows bleeding into paper fibers. I read the lines again, not as a charged sheet, but as an artifact from a night that existed whether I acknowledged it or not. I folded it smaller this time, into quarters, then into eighths. It became a little paper stone, warm in my palm. I didn't tear it. I didn't keep it flat for safekeeping either. I placed it in a small envelope and wrote the date on the front. A museum needs labels, and visitors who know when to move on. Outside, people were already starting their days, the predictable, miraculous choreography of buses and feet and doors and tiny plans. I sat at the table and made my own small plan list. 1, call a therapist. 2, run by the river. 3, water the plant on the windowsill she always forgot. 4, when she calls, say yes to a second conversation and no to a final promise. The list didn't make me noble. It made me accountable to a future I might want even if I couldn't see it yet. The rain, now only a rumor, left the city rinsed. The morning light found our picture frame on the shelf, us on a ferry 3 summers ago, hair lifted by wind, mouths open in mid-laughter. I touched the glass. I didn't turn it down. History isn't a switch. It's a room with many lamps. You dim some, you let others glow. I breathed slow, steady, the way the therapist would tell me to breathe when I finally called. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the long, small mouth. The edge in my chest softened 1 degree, then another. Her sister texted mid-morning, she's here, she's a mess, I'm with her. I typed, thank you. Then I typed, please tell her we'll talk this weekend. The word we felt dangerous and accurate. It was not a vow. It was a bridge nobody had to cross if they didn't want to. If love was going to remain, it would have to learn a new grammar. If it didn't, mercy could still remain. I could live with either. That sentence surprised me with how true it felt. By noon, I had cleaned the apartment the way grief makes you clean. Corners, baseboards, under the bed where the dust keeps the real time. Each room exhaled a little when I finished. The bedroom where she had packed smelled like fabric and a faint salt that might have been tears. I stood by the bed and rested my fingers lightly on the duvet as if it might be a vein. I said out loud we were good, then we can be kind. My voice did not make the room smaller, it made it more exact. In the afternoon, I ran by the river. The water was the same river that had borne witness to my refusal 2 days ago, but it looked different because I did. Sun stitched itself onto the surface, a crosshatch of brightness in motion. A kid threw bread to a duck that didn't want it, and the kid laughed like discovery itself. The city was full of other stories all the time. Mine mattered. Mine did not eclipse the rest. Perspective lifted its wing and cast a cooling shade. When evening came, the apartment was not a courtroom. It was a place where a person could sit and read and drink tea and answer a message when ready. I made rice and vegetables and put out 1 bowl. The second bowl stayed in the cabinet, not as a punishment, not as a declaration, just because tonight there was 1 person eating here and that was a simple fact. I ate slowly. The chair across from me did not ache. It was wood, and wood knows how to be what it is. I took the envelope with the receipt and slid it into a box where old letters live, the ones from when we were new, written in a summer where everything felt like discovery and no one imagined there would be a winter. I didn't rank them, I didn't separate the good from the bad. I let them keep each other company, the way real things do. I closed the box and put it back on the shelf. The shelf did not protest, the room did not dim. The morning light was due again tomorrow, and it would arrive indifferent and generous, the way morning light always does. At the window, night had polished the city into small coins, apartment windows lit, street lamps haloed by the last mist. I pressed my palm to the cool glass and thought of her hand, how it used to be warm in mine, how it might be warm again, how it might not. Both possibilities felt livable. I turned off the light. The apartment held me. The quiet felt like a companion now, not an interrogation. Ending cliffhanger. The phone vibrated on the table, her name, no preview, and for a long breath the room suspended itself between 2 futures, the soft pulse of the screen bright on the wood, the morning light of tomorrow already folding itself somewhere beyond the glass.